Well, guess this is it. No fond farewell? You gonna miss us?
Not even a little.
If you've been involved in gaming for a long time, you probably know by now that games are not equal in so many aspects. Some titles come out and pass by without receiving any attention, while others create a storm in the industry and attract so many eyeballs. Certain games are insanely well-crafted and fun, while others are simply boring and lifeless. However, there's a completely different type of game that also exists in the industry, and its impact goes beyond the mechanical qualities or short-term popularity. This kind of game comes once in decades, and people usually remain emotionally invested in it even long after finishing it. For them, the experience is so profound that the line between the digital world and reality actually blurs, reaching a point where even their own personal life becomes somehow influenced by the game's lore and narrative. In the horror genre, you can find many examples of this phenomena. A franchise like Resident Evil might be a normal video game for some players, but for millions of others, it's literally part of their identity, passion, and even culture. They are obsessed with analyzing its story, characters, and history as if it's a mystery in real life and not a fictional tale on their screens. But even though this enthusiasm is intense and seems out of touch, it mostly remains within the realm of entertainment.
Hello, sister.
With that being said, Silent Hill is a franchise that proved otherwise, because it's a special case where some fans didn't just become emotionally invested in the game's details, but they also crossed the line to make it a sacred art, in which changing the formula or misrepresenting the source material is seen as a literal attack on them personally. Now, of course, I'm only talking about a specific group in the Silent Hill community and not the entire fan base. But the issue is that this group is very loud, aggressive, and frankly, toxic. I didn't really want to make this video, but a few days ago, I came across this informative article online where a former Silent Hill producer explains the horrors that he and his partners went through when they didn't succeed in pleasing Silent Hill fans. As a result, I decided today to talk a little bit about the various groups of people in this fanbase, how they differ, and how some of them are literally a pain in the butt for anyone who engages with them. So please don't take it personally, because this is not about regular fans. It's about the crazy minority that you and I know very well. Anyway, without further ado, let's start. As many of you already know, Silent Hill games are not entirely made by one studio, and not even in a specific country. Silent Hill 1, 2, 3, and 4 were made by the Japanese studio Team Silent, and they're often regarded by players as the golden age of the franchise and the original formula of how a Silent Hill game should be. However, this team was eventually disbanded due to the relative failure of Silent Hill 4, and Konami decided to assign Western developers to make the next Silent Hill games, hoping that it would give the franchise a fresh start. Nevertheless, the results were obviously miserable, and the games kept declining year after year, despite changing the studios over and over. But even though the quality played a crucial role in these games' failure, the aggressive nature of the fans also made it harder for the developers to freely apply their new ideas without alienating the players who admire the original Japanese games. One of the people who struggled with this issue is Tom Hewlett, a producer who worked in several Western Silent Hill titles, including Silent Hill Origins, Shattered Memories, Book of Memories, and Downpour. Tom knew from the very beginning that pleasing the fanbase was not an easy task, but what he didn't expect was that many fans are deeply attached to the early Japanese games, to the extent that any change in tone, style, and direction can basically trigger them. In fact, if you go back to the 2000s, you'll find that many people saw the transition from Team Silent to Western studios as a literal betrayal, and they felt like they were stabbed in the back by Konami. Tom stated that fans were skeptical of the Western capabilities in handling such a game, which led them to criticize any small aspect that they considered a deviation from the original formula. One of the examples he mentioned is Shattered Memories, which was meant to be a reimagined version of the first game, but with new mechanics and more psychological influence.
Harry.
Lisa? No!
According to him, these changes divided fans, and some didn't just reject the new style, but they even went as far as taking it as a personal offense. Their extreme purism fueled toxic behavior that went beyond criticizing the game itself and reached a level where they began to attack Tom himself and other developers like the lead designer, Sam Barlow. Many of you might say this is normal in the gaming field and it's just criticism. But the problem is that some fans were actually more obsessed than you think. And they even wanted to know the names and social media of all the people who worked on the Western games so they could bully them. The harassment intensified further over time, and even his wife was not spared. She worked in customer service at Konami, and she received actual death threats, which left her so shaken and scared that she literally avoided public events. She even intentionally missed the red carpet for the movie Silent Hill Revelation because she didn't want the psychotic fans to see her. Do you understand how crazy this is? This innocent woman was doing her casual job at Konami, yet she found herself in a real-life nightmare just because her husband was involved in making a game that some mentally unstable fans didn't like. But this did not stop with Shattered Memories, because years later, when Silent Hill HD Collection came out, it was sadly full of technical issues and glitches were all over the place, which made the fans incredibly furious. They saw it as an insult to the legacy of their precious games, and Tom found himself again a target of a very vicious and aggressive bullying campaign.
Hi Internet, my name is Tom Hewlett. I'm a game director. I've been working in the industry about 20 years now, but I've been a gamer my whole life.
The man actually tried to explain the reasons behind the technical issues in online forums, but he was met with nothing other than insults, accusations, and death threats. These violent attacks were not only directed at him, but also at his innocent wife, who basically has nothing to do with anything. This is very sad, because Tom at that time was already dealing with personal struggles, and he had to be around his wife because she went through surgery and she needed his support. This forced him to take time off before the game's launch, which limited his ability to address the technical issues. And even though he actually suggested solutions and did not want the game to be released in that state, the publishers simply didn't care about his concerns, and he still received the blame for Konami's decisions. Tom made it clear that Konami didn't do anything to protect the developers, leaving producers and designers exposed to backlash with little support or means to defend themselves. Every developer was working day and night to make something worthy. But when Konami made a mistake behind the scenes, the fans believed that it was the developer's fault, thinking that they didn't care about their beloved franchise. But the real question is, why many Silent Hill fans are exceptionally radical compared to other fan bases, and why they gradually became a cult that doesn't tolerate any different views? Well, to answer this, we need to understand the different types of fans that have appeared since the early 2000s and how they think. When the first Silent Hill game came out back in 1999, 3D survival horror in general was basically something new and barely gaining any momentum outside the Resident Evil club. As a result, gamers at that time were actually experiencing a concept that no one else had seen before, and the psychological horror of Silent Hill felt like a revolution in the genre. The game ended up becoming a massive success on the PlayStation 1, and it sold a good number of copies that paved the way for a sequel. 2 years later, in 2001, we got that sequel. And oh boy, it exceeded all the expectations and led the franchise to a level of popularity that goes beyond the horror genre, and even beyond the realm of gaming itself. For many people, Silent Hill 2 was not just a video game, but it's also a life experience and a story that you can never delete from your mind. In other words, Silent Hill 2 was the spark that turned the franchise into a global phenomenon, and more players were eager to see what's next. The trend of excitement continued with Silent Hill 3, and even though people had a serious problem with Silent Hill 4, they still loved the story and the overall formula because it was made by the same original team. However, when Team Silent was shut down in 2005, fans did not receive this news lightly, because what Konami did not know is that the games of this team have a cult following. And when I say the word cult, I mean it. As I explained earlier, the faithful fans rejected the other Silent Hill games from the beginning, and many didn't even want to give them a chance. This attitude led to the rise of a very infamous group of people in the fanbase, and they are none other than the Purists.
In my restless dreams, I see that town, Silent Hill.
The Purists are mostly players who've been involved in the Silent Hill journey since its inception in 1999, and they've been following its development step by step. When it comes to age, they are almost entirely among the older generation of gamers, meaning that today their age can go from the early 30s all the way to the early 50s. The Purists believe that the early entries of Silent Hill are the definitive experience, and they are convinced that the storylines in the original 4 games are the only proper way to make a Silent Hill game. Some of them even believe that elements like the fixed camera view are essential in the experience, which is why they feel that the modern entries seem bizarre and separate from the original formula. These extreme standards made it hard for new developers to create a game that could match the spirit of the older ones while also expanding the base of customers to reach casual players. I mean, make no mistake, even though Silent Hill fanbase was relatively big at that time, it wasn't big enough for the franchise to keep making money. So staying too faithful is not really an option for developers, because if they don't succeed in making the game appealing for new players, Konami would stop the whole thing altogether. The tragic part is that the Western developers were stuck in the middle, trying to satisfy the purists, while also trying to be creative to make the games compete in the commercial market. But this backfired because it resulted in producing distorted versions of Silent Hill that alienated everyone. The exaggerated demands from the purists were simply too much to handle. They didn't want jump scares and action to be central in the games. They didn't want Pyramid Head to be used outside Silent Hill 2 because it ruins his legacy. They didn't want the lore to expand beyond the Order cult, and they didn't want the sound designs to shift from the style of Team Silent. They simply wanted new games, but with the same lore and old psychological horror, which is reasonable, but the problem was that their minds were always fixated on the original 4 games, and didn't really know what they wanted outside that box. Even when Silent Hill 2 Remake was revealed, they were insanely critical of every small detail, including James's face, hair, and even shoes. But purism doesn't just manifest in rejecting creative liberties from the developers, because over time it intensified to create another insane group in the Silent Hill fanbase that was even more toxic against other players. The Gatekeepers are essentially the worst type of fans that you can ever deal with in the Silent Hill community, and they are a division from the Purists, but they're even crazier. The reason for this is because their negative impact reaches everyone, including both players and developers. Just like the Purists, they reject any creative liberty from new developers, but they also reject any opinion from new gamers who started playing Silent Hill games after the Team Silent era. In their perspective, new players who didn't live through the birth of Silent Hill and its early chapters can never really understand the beauty of the game and what made it special. In fact, some of them would even criticize you if you said that you enjoyed the recent Silent Hill games, and they would tell you that you're an idiot who doesn't know anything about the franchise. They will always mock your takes, make fun of your experience, and consider you an outsider in the community, no matter how much you love Silent Hill. Even if you show total submission to them, they will never see you as one of them, and they will never take your opinions seriously, and they will only see your defeat as a motivation to maintain their supremacy.
I'm stronger, I'm smarter, I'm better, I am better!
The Gatekeepers exist all over the internet. You can find them on Reddit, Twitter, and forums, and they often create bubbles and echo chambers in those spaces. And they rush to downvote or dislike any post with a different opinion. You will see them screaming in the comments about how your life is worthless because you didn't start playing Silent Hill in 1999. And sometimes they will push you to avoid playing Silent Hill by claiming that you can't get its deep psychology. The toxic behavior of gatekeepers have actually resulted in intimidating newcomers and casual fans, leading them to walk away from the Silent Hill universe or be scared to express their ideas and theories about the lore. And speaking of the lore, this leads us to another group in the Silent Hill fanbase, and it's even worse than the previous two. First of all, let me make it clear that being fascinated with the lore and story in Silent Hill is actually a good thing, and it's very healthy to come up with theories to break it down. However, the Lore Supremacists are a very special group of players in the fanbase that somehow turn this amazing aspect into a toxic nightmare for anyone else. These people believe that they are the only genius players who really understand every piece of the complex lore, including the hidden messages, the secret meanings, and the background of characters. They literally act like they are the developers who made the games and they know everything about the narrative, while seeing your ideas as nothing but shallow explanations from someone who didn't understand the profound symbolic details. This group became prominent due to the fact that Silent Hill games have some of the most complicated stories in gaming history, which led many players to compete on who can solve the mysterious elements and fill the voids that the developers left. But once again, people who started playing the games during the early days can inherently claim supremacy over the new players, which allows them to question any of their opinions and enforce their own as the absolute truth. If you publish a post or a video online talking about your theories on the lore, you will always find them in the comments writing stuff like, "Are you sure you played the game? You clearly missed the point. That's not how the story works. Tell me you didn't play the game without telling me you didn't play the game." What's even more provocative is that you'll find them explaining stuff in the story as if it's an objective truth, even though the developers themselves kept it intentionally open for speculation, meaning that literally no one can be 100% sure.
Hey, it was you, wasn't it? You're the one who stepped on my hand.
Maybe I did.
But their ego doesn't affect other players alone. It also extends to reach Western developers who made the newer games. These developers were accused of never playing Silent Hill and misunderstanding the lore, even though someone like Tom was a gamer his whole life and he loved Silent Hill from the beginning. So the Lore Supremacists are some of the most annoying and obnoxious people in the community, and they played a big role in bullying and tormenting new players, pushing them to be hesitant to join the lore discussion because they think that they will get laughed at. And when you try to push back and argue with them, they react like this.
Who are you talking to right now? Who is it you think you see? You clearly don't know who you're talking to, so let me clue you in.
The last group I want to mention in this video is not among the most toxic in the fanbase, but their problem is that they have a very narrow, selfish vision that's only based on their own experience. I like to call these people the nostalgia prisoners because most of them are actually stuck in the past and they refuse to embrace anything from the present. As usual, these people are the players who were there when Silent Hill saw the light in 1999, and they continue to be there when the following 3 games were released. But when the team's silent chain was broken, these people's memory had a glitch, and it caused them to believe that future Silent Hill games can never match the older ones. Even when the new game is really good, they reject logic and rely on their emotions to convince themselves that nothing comes close to the past. The reason behind this mentality is because many of them played the team's Silent games during a very special era in their life, usually their teenage or youthful years, which resulted in them feeling like the experience they went through can never be replicated. So, decades later, these players became older and their lives are not the same anymore, which means that their perspective on video games changed. And they see the modern generation of gaming as inherently inferior. Now, this is not necessarily a bad thing in itself, but the problem is that new Silent Hill players and developers found themselves forced to deal with this attitude everywhere. The Western developers didn't know how they could please these people when their standards are literally based on memories and nostalgia, instead of actual game mechanics and features.
Give it a couple of days at Wayside Max. I bet you'll start to miss this place after all. 'Cause we sure are gonna miss you.
And on the other side, the new fans who joined the online communities found the entire space infested by players who have zero respect for other people's experiences because the past is the golden age and you're an idiot if you disagree. So in summary, guys, the Silent Hill fanbase actually has some serious problems that indirectly had a very negative influence on the franchise's revival over the years. The developers were demonized, new players were made fun of, and the debates took place in bubbles in which certain opinions are dominant by default. In fact, I'm actually risking my life by making this video because I'm confident that Silent Hill Purists, Gatekeepers, and Lore Supremacists will not take this lightly, and they will definitely find me and target my family. These people have no mercy on anyone who fights back, and their mafia tactics are far more powerful than you think. Anyway, please like this video if you enjoyed it. And also, if you are a Silent Hill fan who never had these toxic traits, and you always love seeing more players join the community. See you next time.
Pendleton. Get on the bus.